Hey everyone, James Terlecki. Welcome to episode 1 of Matt Life for Real Life. Now, this particular show is going to be about taking lessons learned on the mat and then applying them to everyday life. And we're going to get into all kind of things. But I thought it'd be kind of, before I start giving you advice, I thought, man, let me tell you a little bit about who I am and how I got started. So I officially began training in martial arts when I was 8 years old. Prior to that, I can remember being 4 years old. I loved Bruce Lee. I watched all the Bruce Lee movies, Chuck Norris movies, any type of ninja movie, you name it. I just had, as far back as I can remember, I had a passion for martial arts, for fighting, and I remember even being, again, I don't remember some of the particulars, but being told that I would, hide in the bushes, wait for the mailman to come around, and attack him. I just loved loved martial arts. I was all about it, and but those early films really kind of lit a fire in me to train and to study martial arts. And when I was 8 years old, my dad enrolled me in Sam Naples Master Chun Karate. It was a Korean Taekwondo academy, and I have nothing but great things to say about Sam Naples and my experience there as a youngster growing up. It was I have so many fantastic memories. It was just it was a striking art. A lot of kicking, some self-defense mixed in there, but very kick-heavy art. And I trained in Korean Taekwondo, from when I was 8 until my teenage years. I competed a lot, different karate and Taekwondo circuits, and did quite well. And but it was more than that. That was my childhood. That's what I remember from being little, and just all the great relationships that I built, all the great friendships, all the lessons I learned on the mat. You learned, one of the reasons why I wanted to call this show Mat Life for Real Life is because of what you learn on the mat. You can only learn certain things on the mat, and so I have had the privilege of learning about me since I was 8 years old, because I've been on the training floor since I was a little kid, and I learned so much about myself. I learned about my strengths, I learned about my weaknesses, everything, and it has taught me so much about myself, and a lot of what I want to teach you guys and how it relates to everyday life. And again, I'm still learning, because I see it in my students now, and how these things just relate to everybody's life, and those lessons learned. But again, I built a ton of good friendships. Some of those friendships, a lot of those friendships, I still have to this day. And that's special to me. Those people will always hold a special place in my heart, because of the time we spent together training, and again, you just develop. It's like another family. So again, I started when I was 8, competed quite a bit, and I love training, and I always wanted to do, when I would be practicing things like that, I always wanted to train like what would really work in a real life situation. That was always my desire. I want to do what really applies to a real life situation. And I enjoyed sparring quite a bit, and the self-defense aspect of things the most. And back then it was you would hear things like, oh, this is the best martial art. No, I trained the best martial art. Everybody's martial art was the best martial art, you know? And, but I always wondered, I always wondered what was the best art. And then when I was a teenager, somebody introduced me to the UFC, and it was like UFC 1, maybe UFC 2, somewhere around that time. And he said, this is my buddy Chris, he's like, you gotta check this out. This is like this is real fighting, like different martial artists competing against one another in this no rules fight contest. And I didn't believe him, to be honest, because I didn't think even the law would permit such a thing. But of course there were some rules, and not many. But that was like my first experience watching that, like open my eyes to, because again, you have to think about who I was when I was little. From youth, I had this desire in my heart to like know what works in a real fight, okay? And so when I seen that, it was like the next chapter in my life was born, And at that time, I only did striking martial arts up to that point, everything on the feet. So when I'm seeing this, I'm witnessing this little Brazilian guy take everybody down, mount them, submit them. I was just blown away. I was like, what is this voodoo? And I started, me and my buddy Chris, we bought some videos, we started training it on our own. Just, we'd watch some of the fights and, oh, he did an armbar, let's try it. All right, rewind that, let's see how to do that. And that's how we started learning to begin with. And then we got some VHS tapes. We started like instructionals, started learning. And it wasn't until sometime later that I found Hoist Gracie was having a seminar in Cleveland, Ohio. So I went to that. Later found out, I'm kind of going a little fast, but later found out that he had an association in Cleveland under Craig Kramer, who I eventually went there and ended up joining. And my first experience there, you gotta think, like, up until that point, all I did, I grappled a little bit at my Korean Taekwondo school, and tried the best I can to learn on my own a little bit. But when I went there, I could submit the majority of people that I rolled with, and even bigger, stronger guys with the little that I knew. But when I went there, it was a new experience. I got crushed, and you know what? I loved it. I was like, man, this is awesome. I can learn something here. And so I joined, and that was kind of like the beginning of my jiu-jitsu journey, where I started to commute, go up to Cleveland. I drive an hour and a half there, an hour and a half back home. I did that for a number of years and trained with Craig Kramer. Really good, solid guy, great instructor, and great students, fantastic. Again, the relationships I built there were priceless, and I love so many of those guys. And again, with that, especially like grappling, arm barring, choking each other, you really begin to learn about yourself. You learn about who you are and how it applies to your everyday life. And so I had the striking background. I had the grappling background. I was shortly after I started training jiu-jitsu, I was introduced to a good friend of mine now, Joe Lance, who was a professional boxer, who helped me with the boxing end of things. Shortly after that, I met Duke Rufus, and we became an affiliate of theirs, and started training under his Muay Thai kickboxing system. Duke was a world champion, and again, just all those lessons, all that time spent training, competing, learning about myself. Who am I? I learned much of that on the mat, and that's kind of what I want to communicate in these episodes, is about the lessons that I've learned on the mat, the lessons that I see, because now I have the privilege. I opened my own school probably, I don't know, what year is it, 2017, 10 years ago. And now I get to see my students. You know, it's interesting. I can tell you within a short time, you know, which of these guys, I could tell you so much about them just by how I see their attendance, how they roll, their consistency, how they interact with other students. I can tell you so much about them because from what I see on the mat, okay? And what you see on the mat and in this person, it tells you so much about that person, who they are, okay? And that's what I want to convey to you. I want to give you those lessons. I want to communicate those things to you so you can learn. And again, people have most people have the wrong ideas. They think that all I do is train fighters. We have a handful of guys that compete in MMA. You know, a few guys. We have some guys that compete in jiu-jitsu, some guys that do some kickboxing matches, but the majority of our students are just average, ordinary, everyday people that hold a job, have a family, their fathers, their husbands, their mothers, whatever, and they just train, right? They want to improve themselves. And it's amazing to see these people transform, you know, because something happens on the mat that you can't teach, right? It has to happen. They have to go through the process. And the people that do go through that process, man, they're changed. You know, they're just different, right? They walk different, they talk different, they communicate with people different, they do their jobs differently. And it's amazing how the things that you learn on the mat apply to your everyday life. And that's what I want to communicate to you guys in these episodes. I hope you'll continue watching. I have a lot more. Again, that was like I fast forwarded through a lot of details of my story, but I just wanted to give you a little bit of introduction, and I'll go through some of those things as they relate to things that apply to everyday life, and we'll get into some more things. But I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. This is episode 1 of Mat Life for Real Life. Who am I? James Terlecki, Next Level Martial Arts. Catch you next time.